My name is Anna, and I'm 34. From the outside, anyone would say I have a charmed life. My husband, Mark, has a stable job here in New York City. I just smile. People only see the bright spots. Only those on the inside know about the shadows. I'm a lead project manager for an interior design and construction firm. Restaurants, apartments, offices, I'm always chasing deadlines. Some days, I get home late. I remember stepping into the elevator one evening. It was almost 9 p.m., a roll of blueprints under my arm, my mind still on hardwood flooring and final inspections. My husband is Mark Anderson, 2 years my senior. He's an operations manager for a corporate office building. It's probably why he has a favorite phrase, "Anna, whatever you do, don't give people a reason to talk." I've heard it so many times it's become background noise, as if life is just an exercise in avoiding public opinion. But when he wanted to be, Mark knew how to win me over. I'd be leaving the office late, and he'd be waiting in the lobby with a hot ginger tea and would take my heavy laptop bag. "Let me carry that," he'd say. "I'm the man here." I believed him because his words always came at just the right moment. The first few months of our marriage were peaceful. We'd leave the house at 7:30 a.m. together. In the evening, we'd stop by the diner at the foot of the overpass for a burger and fries. On weekends, we'd stroll through Central Park, watching the water and talking about our work. I thought that was all a marriage needed, a steady, simple sufficiency. I tried to be respectful toward my in-laws. My mother-in-law, Patricia Anderson, lives in a small town in Pennsylvania. My father-in-law passed away long ago, so she lives alone. She isn't loud. She's soft-spoken and moves with a quiet grace. But every word she says has a pinprick in it. It doesn't draw blood right away, but it leaves a lingering sting. For holidays and the anniversary of his father's death, I'd always prepare gifts, a nice bottle of wine, a box of gourmet chocolates, and I'd always slip her a little cash for expenses. She'd accept them with a gentle smile and a parting shot. A woman should know how to maintain tradition. I'd just nod politely. When she asked about children, I'd tell her we were planning on it. She'd give me a look, saying nothing more. But I could feel myself being weighed and measured. Our apartment is in a mid-range complex in Queens. It has 2 bedrooms, the master and a second room that I use as my office. My desk is by the window, and a corner cabinet holds fabric swatches and wood samples. I call it my sanctuary because it's the only place I can close the door and truly focus. To be clear, the apartment is in my name. Before we got married, my parents sold a small plot of land back home, added it to my savings, and gave it to me as a wedding gift. The deed is all mine. I never bragged about it or held it over him. I just quietly maintained a simple principle. Clarity prevents confusion. Mark knew the apartment was in my name and just smiled. "Sure, it can be in your name. We're a family." But to others, he'd always say something vague like, "It's the house my wife and I bought." It wasn't a lie, but it felt like a way of taking credit. When I gently brought it up, he'd wave it off. "It's just to keep up appearances, Anna. It's all about appearances." That June, my firm took on a project to renovate a coffee shop chain with multiple locations running at once. I was busy, Mark was busy, and just as we were spinning like tops, Patricia started calling more often. She'd ask about our sleep and our meals, then end with her usual line, "It's so hot back home. I thought I'd come up to the city for a few days to cool off." I couldn't refuse. In Mark's family, saying no is easily branded as disrespect, and I was raised with the belief that politeness costs nothing. As a daughter-in-law, that was the first thing people judged. The night before she arrived, I deep-cleaned the apartment, changed the sheets, and scrubbed the kitchen. Mark sat on the living room sofa, occasionally reminding me, "Mom's coming tomorrow. Be gentle with her, okay? Don't make her think you're annoyed." I smiled. "I wouldn't do that." He didn't smile back. He gave me a quick, fleeting look, then turned away. There was something in his eyes, something avoidant. To be honest, I wanted a child too. I'm 34. Whenever people asked if we had any good news, I'd just offer a tight smile. Mark would usually dodge it, saying, "We'll get there. No need for everyone to have an opinion." Patricia was different. She never asked directly, just dropped hints. A house is only settled when it has both a boy and a girl. then she'd fall silent, letting me feel my own inadequacy. Since her husband's death, she leaned on Mark even more. Every time she visited the city, she'd remind him that, back home, everyone looks to the eldest son. Hearing that, Mark would straighten his back, his voice firming up. Sometimes, I'd look at my husband and not see the man I loved. I'd see a man straining to play a role society had built for him. They say where there's smoke, there's fire. I never realized the kindling in my own home had been stacked so high, just waiting for a breeze from Pennsylvania to stir it up. That weekend, my mother-in-law, Patricia Anderson, arrived in New York as promised. She wasn't alone. A younger cousin from her town had driven her to the bus station. As she stepped out of the Uber, she carried a tote bag and a plastic container with some fresh-picked berries. She smiled sweetly. "I'm just here for a few days to see how the city has changed." I held the door open and nodded politely. "Welcome, Patricia. Was the trip okay?" Patricia's eyes swept across the apartment, and she nodded. "It's acceptable. Clean." The word acceptable landed as softly as a feather, but I heard it as a judgment. Mark, however, was beaming. He took her bag, saying, "Come in and rest, Mom. I'll turn on the AC." For her first meal, I kept it simple. A chicken soup, some sautéed green beans, and a baked salmon fillet, with a side of potato salad I'd picked up from the local deli. I figured familiar, comforting food would help her feel at home. She took a small bite of the fish, chewing slowly. She didn't complain, but said casually, "This kind of seasoning absorbs quickly, but it's a bit too salty. Women who work in offices tend to cook with a heavy hand." I forced a smile. "I'll keep that in mind. I'll use less next time." She said, then turned to Mark. "My son, you work in that big building, under so much pressure. You need to eat well to keep your strength up." Mark preened under her words. "Yes, Mom, I know." In just one meal, I saw it clearly. She didn't need to raise her voice. She just needed to direct her words to the right person. To me, it was a suggestion. To Mark, it was a mother's love, and I was automatically cast as the one at fault. The next day, I woke up earlier than usual to prepare breakfast. I was planning to warm up some pastries and make a fresh pot of coffee. My mother-in-law came into the kitchen, glanced at the coffee maker, and asked, "Do you have a thermal carafe?" "Yes, it's on the shelf." She nodded, took it down, and started pouring the coffee as if it were her own kitchen. Standing beside her, I suddenly felt like a kitchen assistant, not the owner of the house. Later, as I was getting dressed for work, she stood at the doorway of my office, my sanctuary. She looked at my computer, at the rolls of fabric swatches, and asked, "What's the point of such a big room like this?" I answered honestly, "I need space for blueprints and material samples for my projects, and I often work late here." Patricia's lips thinned into a smile. "A married woman should know how to manage her priorities. If you're buried in work, who will take care of the house? Who will take care of your husband?" The words weren't an attack. They were softer than silk, but they left my tongue numb. I wanted to say that Mark was busy too, that we shared the responsibilities, but I swallowed the words. My mom used to say that some words, even if they don't cost you money, can cost you your entire day's peace. That afternoon, while I was in a meeting at a construction site, my phone buzzed. A text from Mark, *, "Mom says your office is a mess. Tidy it up when you get home." I stared at the screen and sighed. Was it really a mess? Or did she just dislike me having a space of my own? When I got home that evening, I had barely taken off my shoes when I saw my mother-in-law on the sofa, holding the remote. She spoke as if making small talk. "I'm just catching up on the news. It's hard to get reliable information back home." I mumbled a reply and went to the kitchen. Mark followed me, whispering, "Just try to be understanding. She's older. Let things slide." I turned to look at him. "I haven't argued, have I?" Mark nodded, but his expression didn't soften. It was as if he needed me to promise more, to bend further. The breaking point came at dinner on the third night. I'd made a simple roast chicken with root vegetables. As I set the food down, Patricia looked at me and asked directly, "Your salary must be quite good, isn't it?" I froze. A person's salary is a private matter, but I couldn't show my annoyance. "It's enough to cover my expenses." She nodded, then turned to Mark as if delivering a lecture. A man of the house should be in charge of the finances. A woman shouldn't be counting every penny. A house with order is a house at peace. My throat went dry. I'm not someone who needs to control my husband, much less compete with him. But her words painted me as a petty, calculating woman. I set my fork down gently, trying to keep my voice even. Mark and I share everything. As long as we're in agreement, it works for us. Patricia looked at me, her eyes not angry, just cold. Agreement comes from knowing your place. Mark said nothing. He just served his mother a piece of chicken and smiled. Eat up, Mom. Don't tire yourself out with all this talking. But then he shot me a look, a clear warning. Asterisk. Don't say another word. Asterisk. In that moment, I saw one thing clearly. A man doesn't need to yell. His silence and his choice to stand with someone else is enough to make his wife feel completely alone. Later that night, I went into my office and closed the door. I sat at my desk and opened my laptop but couldn't bring myself to work. From the living room, the TV droned on. I could hear my mother-in-law's voice, quiet but sharp enough to slip through the crack under the door. You married her, son, so you need to know how to guide her. It's a shame to let a woman walk all over you. Mark's reply was muffled. I know, Mom. Don't worry. I leaned back in my chair and thought of an old saying. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. That's a lie. My mother-in-law's words were so gentle, but they were slowly breaking me down. And Mark, the man who once carried my laptop bag, was now the one bringing the stones closer. In early September 2025, autumn arrived in New York. The morning air was crisp, and a gentle breeze drifted across the balcony. I was preoccupied with a project inspection schedule when my body started sending strange signals. For several days, I felt nauseous at the smell of greasy food. My head spun, and everything tasted bland. I'm tough. I can handle the sun and dust of a construction site, but suddenly, even the aroma of coffee made me want to recoil. One Saturday morning, while the apartment was quiet and Mark was still asleep, I took a pregnancy test. I stood in the bathroom, my hand trembling slightly, like the time I signed off on an inspection report with the wrong number. 2 distinct lines appeared. Not faint, not hesitant. My heart skipped a beat. Then a slow warmth spread through me, a feeling of both fear and joy. I instinctively placed a hand on my stomach. With no one to tell, I whispered to myself, Hello, little one. I didn't dare celebrate out loud. For a woman over 30, this news was a blessing, but a blessing to be guarded. I thought of my mother-in-law, of her words about a house needing children, of her measuring gaze. I also thought of Mark, standing in the middle, easily swayed by the wind. I told Mark that same day, choosing a moment after he'd washed his face, before the day's tensions set in. I showed him the positive test and said softly, Mark, I'm pregnant. He froze, his eyes widening. He looked from the test to me, and then he smiled a genuine smile I hadn't seen in months. He pulled me into a gentle hug, as if afraid of breaking something precious. Really? We're going to have a baby. I thought that would be enough happiness for one day, but I was cautious. I want to see a doctor to be sure, and I've been feeling really tired. Mark nodded immediately. Of course. I'll take you tomorrow. On Sunday, Mark took me to the maternity clinic. The hallway smelled of antiseptic. There was the sound of hurried footsteps and nurses calling out numbers. I sat waiting, my heart in my throat. Joy was tangled with fear. No one dares to be confident until a doctor speaks. In the examination room, the doctor looked at the results and confirmed the pregnancy was viable, but she said it was a bit fragile and needed monitoring. She gave me careful instructions. Get plenty of sleep, eat a balanced diet, avoid heavy lifting, and most importantly, avoid stress and arguments. When I heard the word arguments, a chill ran down my spine. I didn't say it, but my mind filled with my mother-in-law's soft, painful words and Mark's silent deference to her. Leaving the hospital, I clutched the folder of papers and walked slowly. Mark stayed close, taking the folder from me without being asked. He even bought me a bottle of warm water. He took me to a diner near the hospital and ordered chicken noodle soup. Eat something light, he said. Don't let yourself get hungry. That evening, he went into the kitchen, simmered ginger with brown sugar, and poured it into a mug for me, a peace offering for the days he'd let me down. He said, From now on, no more heavy work for you. I'll handle things. I looked at him, my heart softening a little. I don't need to be pampered just to see sincerity. But I had one request. Mark, can we keep this to ourselves for a few weeks? I want to wait until we're past the critical stage before we tell our families. I'm afraid your mom will worry and start saying things. My nerves are a little shot right now. Mark hesitated for a moment, then nodded. Okay, I understand. We'll wait until after the first trimester. Don't worry. I know some people would say there's no reason to hide it, but outsiders don't live in a house where appearances hang over everything. I just wanted to protect my baby first. We could deal with public opinion later. As the old saying goes, better safe than sorry. I believed that, especially after waiting so long for a child. In the following days, I tried to adjust my routine. I still went to work, but I no longer stayed at construction sites until dark. I carried crackers and almonds in my bag and sipped on warm milk. At lunch, I ate from the office cafeteria, avoiding spicy food and iced tea. I started paying attention to every wave of fatigue and to the phone calls from Pennsylvania. My mother-in-law called on a Tuesday afternoon. I was reviewing blueprints, my screen filled with dimensions and notes, when the phone vibrated. Patricia's name flashed on the screen. I answered, my voice polite. Hello, Patricia. She spoke with unusual sweetness. Anna, dear, how have you been eating? Are you very busy? I paused. She rarely asked after me with such direct concern. Usually, she circled a topic before steering it toward family duty. I'm fine, thank you, I replied. Work is just a little hectic. She chuckled softly. A woman has to take care of herself no matter what. If you look worn out, your husband will lose interest. It was the same old message, just coated in sugar. I murmured an agreement to end the conversation, but my heart was heavy. I remembered the doctor's words, avoid stress. Yet, with just one sentence, I felt a familiar pang. That night, I told Mark about the strange call. As he changed out of his work clothes, he said, She's just showing she cares about you, Anna. Don't overthink it. I looked at him. That's easy for you to say. I have to read between the lines of everything she says. Mark paused, then replied, Just be gentle. Let it go. There it was again. Asterisk, let it go, asterisk. I didn't argue. I just saw clearly that what I needed while pregnant was a husband who stood beside me, not one who stood in the middle telling me to yield. Another day, she called again, her voice still mild. Is Mark eating well? Remember to make him some vegetable soup to cool him down. Men who work hard build up a lot of internal heat. Yes, I've been cooking for him, I said. She ended with a statement that was both a reminder and a claim of ownership. You have the eldest son in the family. You have to know how to take care of him. I hung up and sat in silence. My stomach was still flat, but inside, a tiny life was clinging on. My biggest fear wasn't a lack of money or a home, but a lack of peace. They say a pregnant woman has to guard her words and her heart. I could guard my words, but my heart was another matter. That evening, I made myself a bowl of butternut squash soup and ate it with a little rice. Looking at the warm, golden soup, I thought, asterisk, all I need is peace, asterisk. I don't need anyone's praise. Mark sat across from me and served me a piece of fish. Eat some more, he said softly. I nodded. In that moment, I still wanted to believe he would keep his promise. But a pregnant woman's faith is like a candle flame. One strong gust of wind can make it flicker. And even with the best news of my life, I couldn't understand why a sense of unease was quietly growing inside my chest. It was a chilly New York night, just cool enough to make you want an extra blanket. I had just showered, my hair still damp, and was in the kitchen warming up a bowl of kale and ginger soup. The doctor had told me to avoid stress, so I developed a habit of eating light and going to bed early. The apartment was quiet except for the low hum of the exhaust fan and the ticking of the wall clock. Mark came out of his home office later than usual. His face was dark, as if he'd swallowed something bitter. He didn't ask if I'd eaten, nor did he look at the soup on the stove. He stood in the middle of the living room, his voice tight, as if he'd rehearsed his words. My mother is moving in tomorrow. I put my spoon down and turned around. Is she visiting for a few days? Mark shook his head. Not visiting. She's staying for a while. You need to clear out the master bedroom for her. I froze, my hands turning cold. Why the master? We have 2 bedrooms. I use the other one for work. Besides, I was about to say that I needed the space to rest because of my fragile pregnancy, but my throat closed up. Mark cut me off. Move your office somewhere else. Mom gets the master. I tried to keep my voice soft. Can you please tell me what's going on? Is she having health problems? Does she miss us? Mark looked me straight in the eye and delivered the news like a stone. She's pregnant. I stood motionless. For a second, I thought I'd misheard. I asked, almost unconsciously, "What did you say?" Mark scowled. I said, "My mother is pregnant. She's older, and people in her town are gossiping. A son in the city, and he lets his pregnant mother stay alone in the country? It's humiliating." The word humiliating landed like a boulder. I swallowed hard, my head spinning. My mother-in-law was 58. I'm not one to judge, but this news was beyond comprehension. I clung to my remaining rationality. She's at an advanced age, Mark. We need to get her to a doctor. A pregnancy at her age is very high risk. We should take her to a good hospital for a checkup. Mark waved his hand dismissively. We'll deal with that later. The important thing now is to arrange her room, clear out the master for her first. I felt a dull ache in my lower abdomen, a vague tension, as if someone were pulling a string inside me. I steadied myself against the kitchen counter and took a slow breath. Mark, I swallowed the words, times pregnant times again. I had promised to keep it quiet for a few weeks, but now I was afraid. Afraid that if I said it, it would become a competition, and I would be the one forced to concede. Mark paced the living room, rattling off a to-do list. Tomorrow, go buy some of that expensive organic bone broth, some wild-caught salmon for poaching, and maybe some of those fancy prenatal supplements from the health food store. She's having bad morning sickness and can't eat the food back home. A daughter-in-law should know what to do. I looked at him, my voice still trying to be gentle. Mark, those things are expensive. Let's buy just enough for now, and we should really take her to a doctor first. We should follow the doctor's advice on her diet. Mark slammed his hand on the TV stand. The sharp crack made me jump, my heart sinking. Stop it, Anna. Stop talking about money all the time. My mother is in this situation, and you're worried about the cost? Do you want me to be humiliated? I struggled to stay calm, but my head was buzzing. I'm not being cheap. I just want to be responsible and make sure she's safe. High-risk pregnancies are serious. Mark enunciated each word. The risk is my mother's to bear. My family's honor is mine to protect. When she gets here, you will take care of her. No arguments. Don't make me look bad. The phrase look bad was no longer just a habit. It was a threat. I stood there. The soup on the stove was still steaming, but a chill ran from my spine down to my feet. I asked a small, almost pleading question. So, if she's staying for a long time, what's the arrangement? My office. I have projects running. I need my computer, my documents. Can you give me some time? Mark turned, his eyes filled with irritation. You need your work, but my mother needs her dignity. You choose. That statement tore down the last curtain between us. I suddenly realized that in his eyes, the most important thing wasn't health, or truth, or even the fragile pregnancy in his wife's womb. It was his reputation. I stopped arguing. I just asked, is she arriving tomorrow? Mark nodded. Yes. Start clearing the room tonight so it's ready. I looked toward the master bedroom, the place where I always slept best because it was spacious and airy. A room I once thought was our sanctuary. Now it was being assigned like a room in a boarding house. I walked into the room, opened the closet, and took out a large duffel bag to start packing my clothes. The hangers clinked together. Mark stood in the doorway, issuing orders. Move your things to the office. The master needs to be empty for Mom. I didn't reply. I just folded each shirt, each towel, trying to move gently so as not to upset my stomach. A single phrase repeated in my head. Asterisk, stay calm, asterisk. The doctor had warned me to avoid shocks, but a shock had just broken down my door. After a few minutes, I heard Mark on the phone in the living room. He was speaking quickly, his voice sharp. Don't worry, Mom. I've arranged everything. Anna is clearing out the master bedroom for you. When you get here, you have to stay in the best room. We can't have people talking. I froze mid-motion. the pillow in my hand suddenly feeling heavy. It had all been decided before he even spoke to me. I was just the person who had to be informed and then obey. I carried my things to the office. The once tidy room was now cluttered with my suitcase, blankets, and pillows. I set the pillow down on a chair and looked at my desk, feeling hollow. It wasn't the physical hardship, it was the feeling of being pushed out of my own space, in my own home. That night, I lay on the small, temporary bed in my office. Outside, Mark turned off the living room lights and walked past my door. He didn't offer a single word of apology or ask if I was tired. He just tossed out one final, sealing statement. "Mom arrives tomorrow. Remember to be respectful." I turned to face the wall, my hand resting on my stomach, trying to listen to my own breathing. I didn't cry out loud. I just felt an emptiness inside, as if I'd been uprooted. And I understood then that some families don't need shouting matches. All it takes is a late-night command and the two words public image to make a person feel utterly small. The next morning, I woke while it was still dark, not because I was diligent, but because I couldn't sleep. In the cramped office, I tossed and turned, my husband's sharp words replaying in my mind. I tiptoed to the kitchen, heated some water, and made myself a warm drink to soothe my stomach. With a high-risk pregnancy, the last thing I needed was panic or a racing heart. Mark woke up a little later, his face still tense, his phone in his hand like a weapon. No good morning, no asking what I wanted to eat. He walked straight to the kitchen, pulled out a chair, and made a call. Before I could react, he put it on speaker. "Hello, Mom? How are the preparations going?" Patricia's voice came through the phone, breathless and whining. "Oh, son, it's been awful. People in town are whispering behind my back. I can't even go outside without hearing them gossip, saying the family has a son in New York, yet they let his pregnant mother fend for herself in the country. It's so humiliating." I stood by the sink, still holding my warm mug, but my throat felt parched. She said, "humiliating," as if our family owed her a debt of honor, and I was the one who had to pay it. Mark shot me a glance before speaking into the phone with the voice of a dutiful son. "Don't worry, Mom. I've taken care of everything. You'll have a proper place to stay here." A second voice, a man's, cut in. It must have been an uncle or a cousin. "So, is Anna on board with this? City girls can be very opinionated." Mark gave a wry laugh. "Don't worry, Uncle. We've got it handled." Patricia chimed in, as if afraid to miss her cue. "She's all right, I suppose, but women can be so calculating. Honestly, son, you have to know how to keep your wife in line. Don't let people laugh at our family name." Hearing the phrase, "keep your wife in line," felt like having a wet towel thrown over my face. I wanted to speak up, to say I never objected to her coming. But the speakerphone made it clear that one word from me would be an act of defiance, and if I argued, they would have their excuse to condemn me. Another woman's voice joined in, probably an aunt. "We already told you back here, a pregnant woman needs to be cared for properly. If the daughter-in-law doesn't do it, she's a disgrace." I stood there, motionless. A disgrace, asterisk. They labeled me as quickly as slapping a sticker on a box. Everything was already decided. They were just waiting for me to open my mouth so they could seal my fate. Mark turned to me, his eyes signaling me to stay quiet, then said into the phone, "Yes, we have it all arranged. When you get here, just focus on resting." Patricia then began listing her demands as if ordering from a menu, her tone even and firm. "I'm having terrible morning sickness. I can only stomach things like that expensive organic chicken broth, poached salmon, and maybe some of those special smoothies with kale and ginger, and I can't stand the smell of anything fried or too garlicky. Do you understand?" Mark replied instantly, "Yes, Mom, I know." I felt a wave of dizziness, not because of the food, but because of the way she spoke. It was as if she were ordering a service, and I was the one who had to fill the order correctly. Mark hung up, and before I could even take a breath, he turned to me. "This afternoon, go buy the best quality organic broth. Don't get the cheap kind, or Mom will complain and we'll be embarrassed." I put my mug down, trying to keep my voice calm. "The good kind is very expensive, Mark. Let's just get a moderate amount for now and take her to a doctor first. We should follow the doctor's advice. Besides, we have other expenses." Mark sneered. "There you go again. I'll take care of the money. Don't you bring up money." I almost laughed, a bitter laugh. I wasn't bringing up money to show off. I was bringing it up because my wallet was being treated like an endless supply. But I didn't laugh. I just felt his words cut like a thin knife, not drawing blood but severing any sense of fairness. I asked quietly, "You say you'll take care of the money. Then who's been paying the utility bills and the internet for the past few months?" Mark's voice grew harsh. "Are you keeping score with me now? Do you want to make things awkward for me in front of my mother?" "Awkward. Appearances." I swallowed again. They say you shouldn't fight over money, but it turns out that fighting for appearances is even worse, because it forces one person to bow down so another can stand tall. I still went to work that afternoon, but my mind was elsewhere. I took calls from suppliers, signed off on orders, and checked on timelines, but my hands were cold. My biggest fear was a fragile pregnancy combined with a troubled mind. I kept telling myself, better safe than sorry, stay calm, but calmness isn't a switch you can just flip. After work, I stopped by a specialty food store and bought a few things on Mark's list. I didn't buy the most expensive brands, but I chose reputable ones. I also bought some fresh vegetables and fruit, just in case the household became solely focused on pregnancy foods and forgot about balanced meals. When I got home, Mark was waiting at the door. He inspected my shopping bags like a customs officer. He pulled out the container of bone broth and scowled. "Why did you buy this brand?" "Mom will say it's cheap," I replied, my voice still respectful. "This one is good quality, Mark. It's certified. Let's have her try it first. If she likes it, we can buy more. At her age, her diet should be supervised by a doctor anyway." Mark cut me off. "Don't you lecture me on how to be a son. I told you to buy the best, and you should have." I looked at him, speechless. I wanted to say, "I'm not lecturing you. I just want to do things properly, *." But in his eyes, I was just the person who made him look bad by asking questions. Dinner that evening was simple: butternut squash soup, lightly seasoned pork, and a plate of steamed vegetables. I tried to keep the smells to a minimum, catering to a morning sickness I had yet to witness firsthand. Mark ate a few bites, then went back to scrolling through his phone, his face tense. I asked a small question, like laying the first brick for clarity. "Mom is arriving tomorrow morning, right? I'll prepare some extra towels for her." "Yeah," Mark said, then added nonchalantly, "Take the morning off work tomorrow to be here when she arrives. You need to know how to serve her properly." The word serve times hung in the air, unspoken but clear. I fell silent. The hottest thing inside me wasn't anger, but a sense of degradation. I remembered a saying my mother used to repeat, "A soft answer turns away wrath *." It used to sound wise. Now it just sounded sad. If you're always the one giving the soft answer, the other person never has to learn to control their wrath. Night fell. I cleaned the kitchen, wiped the table, my movements slow to avoid straining my abdomen. Mark went into his room and shut the door with a sharp click. I stood alone under the yellow kitchen light, looking at the bags on the counter, and understood. I hadn't just been asked to buy soup and salmon. I had been ordered to prove that I knew my place, according to their standards. The house was quiet, but my mind was not. I didn't cry. I just knew that if I continued to let disgrace be the measure of my worth, they would demand I pay with much more than just money. They would demand my self-respect. That night, after a bland dinner, Mark leaned back on the sofa, his eyes glued to his phone, his thumb swiped relentlessly, his brow furrowed. I stood at the sink, washing dishes, my mind stretched taut like a rubber band. After a full day of being publicly tried on speakerphone without saying a word, I knew silence had its limits. I had to ask, not to win, but to know how to survive. I dried my hands and walked into the living room, keeping my voice low. "Mark, I just have one question. With your mother staying here, living with us, we should at least know who the baby's father is. It will help us manage what to say to outsiders. People in her town are gossiping." I spoke slowly, choosing each word carefully, trying to use his own obsession with appearances as a reason for him to understand I wasn't being defiant. Mark looked up, his eyes flashing as if I'd touched a raw nerve. He slammed his phone on the table. "Drop it, Anna." I froze. I'm just asking so we can be prepared. We'll need to take her for checkups, and the hospital will ask for information." He stood up, taking a step toward me, his voice a low growl. "My mother's business is none of your business. Asking that is disrespectful." The word disrespectful made my face burn. I hadn't raised my voice to his mother, hadn't argued in front of his family. I had endured so much that day, my throat was bitter with it. I tried to stay calm, reminding myself not to get agitated. "Mark, I'm asking because I want to help. A high-risk pregnancy is dangerous. We need to get her seen by a doctor as soon as possible." He wasn't listening. He struck the coffee table with his open palm, a dry, sharp crack. "I already told you. We'll deal with that later. My mother is here to rest. Your job is to do your duty as a daughter-in-law." I looked him straight in the face. For the first time, this man was speaking to me like a subordinate. I swallowed hard, still trying to be gentle. "I understand my duty, but everything has to make sense. I'm asking who the father is, so if the neighbors or the building management ask, we'll know what to say." Mark snapped. "No one is allowed to ask. If they do, ignore them. Don't bring this drama into my house." I was stunned. Drama. He was the one who brought it in, yet he forbade me from asking about it. The sheer absurdity of it made my heart pound. I placed a hand on my stomach, an instinctive gesture to remind myself to stay calm. The doctor's words echoed in my mind. Seeing my gesture, Mark grew even more irritated. "Who are you playing the victim for? If you're tired, that's your problem. My mother is the one who needs to be looked after." His words were a splash of ice water. I had been about to tell him I was also pregnant, but I stopped myself. Not because I wanted to hide it, but because I knew that saying it now would turn it into a competition. My pregnancy would be weighed against his mother's, and the scale would undoubtedly tip in favor of his public image. I took a step back. "Fine, I won't ask again. But please, just one thing. When she arrives tomorrow, let's take her for a checkup. At least a blood pressure check, some basic tests. At her age, anything could happen." Mark pointed toward the master bedroom. "Enough. Now finish moving your things out of the master. Everything goes into the office. I want that room empty tonight." I looked up. "Tonight? Can you give me some time? I have my computer, my documents. I need to organize them." He let out a cold, humorless laugh. "If you're so busy with work, figure it out. My mother arrives tomorrow morning. If you don't clear it, I will." I stood silently for a few seconds, then nodded. Not in surrender, but to avoid an explosion. They say one moment of patience can prevent a lifetime of regret. I was being patient, not because I was wrong, but because I had a life to protect. I went back into the master bedroom and opened the closet. The familiar scent of my fabric softener suddenly made me feel sick. I folded my clothes and packed them in a suitcase, my movements slow, as if I were afraid of dropping something fragile. Mark leaned against the doorframe, watching me like a warden. He started laying down the law. "Starting tomorrow, when Mom is here, no more perfume. She's sensitive to smells. Don't spray anything strange in the house." I nodded just to get it over with. He continued, "In the kitchen, no more fish, no more strong spices. The smell will bother her." I nodded again. Then he delivered the final rule. "Whatever my mother brings, you don't touch it. Whatever she wants, you get it for her. Don't upset her." I listened as my heart grew colder. In just one night, this house no longer followed my rules. I carried a stack of blankets to the office and set them on a chair, looking at how the once organized space was now cluttered like a storage room. My stomach tightened again. I had to sit down and take a few deep breaths. Mark saw me but didn't ask if I was okay. He just offered a final reminder. "Don't be so fragile. My mother is going through 100 times more than you are." I wanted to scream, "I have my own struggles too." But I held my tongue. My mother taught me to think before I speak. I didn't want to give him another reason to brand me as disrespectful. After I finished, I locked the master bedroom door out of habit, then realized I no longer had the right to. I stood there, staring at the doorknob, a sinking feeling in my chest. Mark walked past, his voice cold. "Mom arrives early tomorrow. Wake up to greet her, and remember to cook something without a strong smell." That night, I lay in the office next to rolls of fabric and blueprints. My back ached, my stomach was sore, and my eyes were wide open. In the living room, Mark was on the phone, his voice low. He was probably talking to his mother again, telling her how his wife would take care of everything. I heard his muffled words and tasted bitterness on my tongue. I turned to the wall, placed a hand on my belly, and whispered to myself, asterisk, hang in there with me, little one asterisk. People say to pick your battles, but if you keep letting things slide, people will think you have no boundaries. And there, in that cramped room, for the first time, I understood one thing clearly. I couldn't live on patience alone anymore. The next morning, I woke early as Mark had instructed, not out of eagerness, but because my heart was heavy. I made myself a glass of warm water and stood looking at the gleaming kitchen counter, feeling as if the ownership of everything in the house had changed overnight. Mark was dressed in a pressed shirt, his hair neatly combed as if for a family reunion. He paced between the living room and the front door, glancing at his watch, then his phone. I didn't ask any more questions. Last night's question had been deemed a crime, another would only get me yelled at. Around 9 a.m., the doorbell rang. Mark opened it immediately. Patricia stepped inside, not with the hesitation of a visitor, but with the confidence of someone returning to claim her property. She wore a dark brown pantsuit, her hair in a neat bun, carrying a large tote. Behind her, another figure followed closely like a shadow, a younger man I didn't recognize. I assumed he was a relative who'd helped with the drive. Let's call him Kevin. Good morning, Kevin said respectfully, his eyes darting around the room, taking everything in. Patricia nodded. Kevin, put my bags in my room. I stood by the kitchen door and nodded politely. Welcome, Patricia. Was the trip okay? She gave me a cool smile. Of course not. Being pregnant is very difficult, you know. Before I could respond, she was already wheeling her suitcase toward the master bedroom, the very room Mark had forced me to vacate. Kevin followed with her other bags, moving with a familiarity that unsettled me. Mark stood at the bedroom door, fussing. Go on in and rest, Mom. I'll have Anna make you something light. I heard the word have, and a chill went through me. My husband was speaking to his mother as if I were the hired help. From her new room, Patricia's voice called out, Anna, did you change the sheets? I can't stand the smell of strange fabric softeners. Yes, I changed them, I replied. She clicked her tongue. Well, it still smells funny. Honestly, a woman needs to have an eye for detail. Kevin emerged from the room, interjecting naturally. Anna, Patricia is very sensitive to smells. Please don't cook anything with strong spices. She only likes very simple things. I turned to him, keeping my voice even but firm. I'll handle the kitchen. You just take care of her bags. Mark shot me a look, a clear warning. I saw it then. The moment I tried to set a boundary, they saw it as defiance. For lunch, I made a simple vegetable soup and lightly seasoned chicken. The aroma was minimal. Patricia ate a few spoonfuls, then began critiquing everything, the way I placed the silverware, how I poured the water, even where I sat at the table. Mark, meanwhile, served her food, constantly repeating, Have some more, Mom. I felt like a spectator at my own dinner table. That afternoon, exhausted, I was about to go lie down in my office when Mark called out sharply, Anna, come here. Mom wants a drink. I walked out to see Patricia stretched out on the sofa. Rub my feet for a bit, she commanded. My ankles are swelling. I stood there, stunned. It wasn't that I was unwilling to care for an elder, but her tone was that of a queen ordering a servant. I looked at Mark, hoping he would say something, but all he did was echo her. Go on, Anna. She's tired. In that moment, I knew that if I continued to seek fairness from Mark, I would only be met with silence. In this house, everything flowed one way. Toward his mother, I bent down and rubbed her feet for a few minutes, doing just enough. When I finished, I stood up. Please rest. I have some work to do. Patricia gave a dismissive, Mark said nothing. I went into my office, closed the door, and leaned back in my chair. My heart was pounding, not with anger, but with humiliation. Later that night, when the house was quiet, I spoke to Mark in a low voice, a final attempt at civility. Mark, I'm not trying to stop your mother from staying here, but I need a basic level of respect. I have a job and my health to consider. Please don't let me become a servant in my own home. Mark didn't even look up from his phone. "You're overthinking it," he mumbled. I bit my lip. "I'm not overthinking. I just want clarity. I want boundaries." He finally looked up, his eyes weary but cold. "What boundaries? This is my family's business." I looked straight at him. "Our family," he retorted with a single sentence that severed everything. It wasn't loud, but it was final. "You're an outsider. You wouldn't understand my family's business." The words "an outsider" landed like a slap. My face flushed, my ears ringing. I had thought I was his wife, his partner, the person building a life with him. With one sentence, he had turned me into a tenant. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stood up and nodded slowly. "Yes, I understand." It was easy to say, but the understanding was profound. From that moment on, my words had no value in this house. I couldn't win against them with words, so I would have to win with what they feared most: paperwork and the truth. I went into my office and opened my laptop, not for a project, but for something else entirely. I checked all the documents for the apartment, the gift affidavit from my parents, the deed in my name, all related paperwork. I took photos, scanned them, and saved them in dated folders, then uploaded a secure copy to a private cloud storage account only I could access. Next, I logged into my bank accounts, changed the passwords, enabled two-factor authentication, and reviewed our joint spending. I didn't drain the accounts that would only give them a reason to cry foul, but I opened a new, separate account and transferred enough money to be self-sufficient. I documented every step, as carefully as if I were preparing a legal brief. The next day, during my lunch break, I went to the bank and rented a small safe deposit box. I placed all the original documents inside. Holding the receipt, I finally felt like I could breathe again, as if I had just locked a door someone was trying to force open. When I got home, I spoke to Mark with the most natural tone I could manage. "I want to install a couple of security cameras, one at the front door and one in the living room. There have been some break-ins in the complex lately. With your mom here, we should be extra careful." Mark, preoccupied, just nodded. "Sure, whatever you want. Just don't make it a big deal." I scheduled an installer. The cameras were small and discreet. I chose positions that covered the entryway, the kitchen, and the living room. I didn't say more. Some things are best left unspoken. That night, I lay in my office, listening to Patricia's soft cough from the living room and Mark turning over in the master bedroom. I no longer felt the self-pity of the night before. The pain was still there, but it had sharpened into clarity. They say you reap what you sow. I hadn't sown any wind, but if they continued to sow disrespect, control, and deceit, one day they would have to harvest their own storm. As for me, I was doing something simple: protecting what was mine, protecting the peace for my child, and protecting the dignity that the words "an outsider" had nearly crushed. I've never been a suspicious person. I used to believe that suspecting others only brings yourself misery. But life is strange. Sometimes, a single sentence, appearing at the right time and place, can pull down the entire curtain. That evening, Mark got out of the shower and tossed his phone on the coffee table before heading to the kitchen for a glass of water. From the master bedroom, Patricia called out for him to bring her a back pillow. Kevin was bustling in the hallway, carrying in more of her bags, moving with the ease of a family member. I was sitting on the sofa near the kitchen, pretending to watch the news, but my ears were on high alert. It wasn't that I wanted to eavesdrop. It was that they spoke in front of me as if I didn't exist. Just then, Mark's phone buzzed. The screen lit up, unlocked, on the table. A text notification popped up, the sender's name large and clear. Kevin. I didn't mean to look, but it was right there. The message was just a few lines, but it sent a chill down my spine. Asterisk Mark. Make sure Anna doesn't give her a hard time. She's feeling sick and only eats the things I usually buy for her. Don't let her get upset. Asterisk. I read it, and my hand on the cushion instinctively tightened. The tone wasn't a request, it was an order. It was as if Kevin was the one coordinating this household, and I was the one who needed to be managed. Mark came back and saw me looking at the screen. He snatched the phone, his movement a little too fast, a little too guilty. I looked directly at him, not with anger, but with a simple question. Why is Kevin texting you like that? Mark faltered, then sighed, as if I were the source of his annoyance. He runs errands for my mother. She likes him, so he's just being thorough. I nodded as if I believed him, but a series of questions ignited in my mind. If he was just running errands, why did he need to warn Mark about me? Why did he claim she only times 8 what he bought for her? How could an outsider speak with such authority about her habits? I didn't push it into an argument. I just said softly, "From now on, if there's anything about your mother's meals, please tell me directly. We don't need outsiders getting involved." Mark shrugged. "You're overthinking it again. Asterisk. Overthinking it, asterisk." The phrase had become a lid to slam shut on everything. I didn't need to argue further. When someone refuses to listen, you can talk until you're hoarse and it won't make a difference. I stood up to clear the kitchen. My mind already shifted into a different mode. Back in my office, I opened my phone, not to send an angry text, but to document. I took a mental snapshot of the notification and wrote it down in a private file: date, time, content, sender. I treated it like a project log. You need a paper trail to assign responsibility. I didn't want to be a complainer or be dismissed as a suspicious wife. But I understood that in a battle where your opponent uses morality as a weapon, you don't lose because you're wrong. You lose because you don't have proof. Late that night, after Mark had gone into the master bedroom, I stepped onto the balcony for some air. Then I called Patricia. Not to confront her, but with the polite voice of a daughter-in-law. "Patricia, it's Anna. I'd like to take you for a checkup tomorrow morning, just to be safe. At your age, we should check your blood pressure and get some basic tests done." There was a pause on the other end, then a smooth reply. "Oh dear, I'm too weak to be moving around. It might disturb the baby. Back home, we're very careful about these things. You just focus on cooking the meals I like, and that will be enough." I persisted gently. "But a checkup is for your own peace of mind. We have excellent hospitals here in New York." She let out a soft laugh, a laugh that sounded scripted. "If you want to know what I can eat, just ask that boy Kevin. He knows what I like. He buys things for me all the time. Ask him. It will be faster." My heart sank. A mother-in-law, instead of communicating with her daughter-in-law, was directing her to a family helper. That level of closeness wasn't just friendly, it was a closed circle, and I was on the outside. I said my goodbyes and hung up. I went back inside, past the master bedroom. The door was closed, a thin slice of light escaping from underneath. Patricia coughed, and Mark murmured something in reply. I couldn't hear the words, nor did I want to. I just felt that everything in this house was now revolving around a different axis, and it wasn't the axis of a husband and wife. I returned to my office and opened my project notebook, but this time I wasn't noting down materials or timelines. I drew a short timeline of my own: the day she arrived, the day Kevin appeared, the time of the text, the time of the call. Then I circled it in red pen. I knew what I was doing might seem cold, but if I wasn't cold, I would shatter. Outside, the TV was still on, low. I sat for a long time, my hand on my stomach, reminding myself to speak softly, to breathe evenly, to protect my child. Some people say pregnancy makes a woman weak. I think that's half right. You're weak because you're afraid of anything harming your child. But you're strong because, for your child, you can become ruthlessly clear-headed. And that night, I understood. From that one text message, this was no longer about a difficult mother-in-law. It was a network, and I would not be walking into it with tears. I would be walking in with clarity. The next morning, I woke before dawn, not from diligence, but from the sound of drawers opening and footsteps in the hallway. My temporary bed was so close to the wall that any strong movement made the floor vibrate. I sat up, rubbed my stomach to calm the tension, and walked out. In the living room, Patricia was already seated on the sofa, propped up with pillows, her expression as serious as a judge. Kevin stood near the shoe rack, holding a bag, looking eager. Mark was busy making warm water, constantly asking, "Drink this, Mom." Patricia glanced at me. "You're up? Get me a light blanket, one without any scent, and open a window. It's stuffy in here." I said, "Yes, ma'am," and did as she asked. I chose silence to conserve my energy. But silence didn't mean I couldn't hear Kevin interjecting, "Anna, just crack it open a little. A draft could give her a cold." I turned to look at him. He was acting like a concerned son. I didn't correct him. I just placed the blanket on the armrest and went to the kitchen. I thought I'd find some peace there, but the kitchen had also become a stage. The moment I opened the cabinet to get oatmeal, Kevin followed me in, standing exactly where I usually stood, as if he knew the layout by heart. "Just make plain oatmeal," he instructed. "She's feeling nauseous. No sugar, no cinnamon." I looked him in the eye. "Thank you for the suggestion, but from now on I will ask her directly about her meals. I don't need to go through you." Kevin smiled, his voice still soft. "Of course. I just don't want you to have to work so hard." "I can manage my own workload," I replied. I made the oatmeal, bland and odorless, exactly as instructed. I even steamed some butternut squash to go with it. It was a meal no one could complain about. Yet, Patricia took a few spoonfuls and sighed. "This is too bland. This woman doesn't know how to season anything." Mark immediately turned to me. "Add a little more salt," I replied flatly. "The doctor recommends a low-sodium diet for older pregnant women. High blood pressure is a risk." Mark faltered, then whispered, "Well, just make it taste a little better." Patricia delivered the final verdict. "In this house, you do as I say. Don't argue with me." I swallowed. That swallow wasn't just swallowing my anger, it was to keep my hands from shaking. After breakfast, I was about to sit down at my desk to handle some urgent project emails when Patricia called out, "Anna, go and clear out the closet in my room. I need space to hang my clothes. You can move your things to the other room." I froze for a second. That was our closet. But she said, "my room," as if it had belonged to her all along. I said gently, "I'll get to it, but I have some urgent work to do first." Mark cut in, "Do it for Mom first. Your work can wait." Kevin chimed in with perfect timing, "I can help you, Anna. Just tell me where everything goes." I looked at his eagerness and found it strange. An outsider, more enthusiastic than the owners. I walked into the master bedroom. Kevin was already there, opening a suitcase and laying clothes on the bed as if he'd done it 100 times. He knew which drawer held the hangers, where I kept the cedar blocks. He even pulled out the bottom drawer where I stored off-season items. I stood beside him, my hands cold. Patricia sat on the bed, directing traffic. "Hang that dress up. Change this blanket. I don't like the smell." I did as I was told, but I no longer addressed her with any warmth. I kept my words short to prevent any emotion from spilling out. At lunchtime, I made a vegetable soup and lightly seasoned pork. As I was setting the table, Kevin appeared at the kitchen door again. "She said she wants that organic bone broth today. You should make it now before she gets too tired." I put down the silverware and looked at him. "That broth is a special item, not fast food. This is a home, not a restaurant. Stop acting as a middleman and giving me orders." Mark overheard and came out. "Why are you being so tense?" Kevin was just passing on a message. I replied, my voice low but firm. "Mark, I am not against your mother, but I will not have an outsider dictating what happens in my kitchen. It's not normal." Mark's face flushed, probably because the word outsider hit a nerve. He lowered his voice. "Keep it down. Mom will hear you and get the wrong idea." I let out a tiny, silent laugh. The wrong idea or the right one? From the master bedroom, Patricia's voice drifted out. "Anna, what are you whispering about? It's irritating me." I called back, "Nothing. It's almost ready." In this house, her irritation was a family crisis. My irritation was something I had to swallow. By that afternoon, I was truly exhausted. I sat down, feeling a familiar tightness in my lower abdomen. I quietly went to my office, lay on my side, placed a hand on my stomach, and reminded myself to breathe. Just then, my phone buzzed with an email from a client asking for a progress report. I stared at the screen, tears welling in my eyes, not from weakness, but from the feeling of being squeezed out of my own life. I remembered the saying, "Only the one wearing the shoe knows where it pinches." From the outside, people would only see a daughter-in-law caring for her pregnant mother-in-law. But inside this house, the pinching wasn't a sharp pain. It was a slow, grinding ache, wearing down my self-respect. That night, Mark pulled me aside into the living room and said, as if granting a favor, "Just hang in there for a few more days. Once Mom settles down, things will get better." I looked at him calmly. "Okay, I can hang in there. But remember, just because I'm enduring it doesn't mean I don't see it. I went back to my office and opened the camera app one more time to check the feed. Everything was clear. The front door, the kitchen, the living room. I turned off the screen. That night, I didn't go to sleep right away. I just sat in the quiet, my hand on my belly, telling myself to stay alert. Because from that day on, this house was no longer a place for hope. It was a place for recording the truth. The night it all came into focus was a weekday. I remember because I had a client meeting the next morning to finalize material samples. The new order in the house seemed to have settled in. Patricia occupied the master bedroom. Mark tiptoed around her. And I was in my office, trying to compartmentalize my emotions to save my strength. Around 11 p.m., the living room lights went out. The TV fell silent. I heard the master bedroom door click shut, followed by Mark's soft cough. No one wished each other good night. It was a full house that felt as cold as a motel. I lay on my side, my hand on my stomach, reminding myself to breathe evenly. I'd been sleeping fitfully for days. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard their voices' words, like time's disgrace, asterisk, asterisk, duty, asterisk, and the condescending tone of an outsider in my kitchen. Asterisk, don't think about it, asterisk, I told myself. Asterisk, the baby is fragile, asterisk. Just then, my phone vibrated softly, not a call, but a notification from the camera app. The screen read, asterisk, motion detected at front door, asterisk. I sat bolt upright, my heart pounding as if I'd missed a step on a staircase. I didn't turn on the light. I pulled the blanket off, my hands shaking as I opened the app, turning the volume all the way down. The feed from the front door camera appeared. The apartment hallway was empty, the yellow light casting long shadows. Then, a figure stepped into the frame, tall, slender, wearing a baseball cap. I recognized him immediately. It was Kevin. What made my blood run cold wasn't that he was at our door, it was that he didn't ring the bell. He bent down, his hand moving over the keypad. His fingers moved quickly, decisively. A soft beep, then the quiet click of the lock disengaging. The door opened. I sat there, frozen. How did an outsider like Kevin know the code to my apartment? I had thought Mark just used him for errands. But errand boys don't let themselves into someone's home in the middle of the night. Kevin stepped inside, closing the door so quietly it was almost inaudible. He didn't call out for Mark or me. He took off his shoes and slipped on a pair of house slippers with practiced ease, then walked straight down the hall toward the master bedroom. I switched to the living room camera. The image was clear. Kevin walked past the sofa without a glance, as if he knew exactly where everyone was. The hallway camera caught him stopping in front of the master bedroom door. He knocked twice, very lightly, like a signal. The door opened a crack, a sliver of yellow light spilling out, and then it closed again. I swallowed hard. A single question screamed in my mind. Asterisk, does Mark know? Asterisk. I switched to the kitchen camera feed. It was dark. The living room camera showed no sign of Mark. This meant Kevin wasn't here to see him. I didn't dare turn on the audio, afraid that the slightest sound would give me away. I just hit record, saving the video clip, and immediately backing it up to my private cloud. My hands were ice cold, but my mind was unnervingly sharp. I forced myself to follow a procedure, like documenting a site issue. Save clip, note time, date, and camera angle. Only after it was done did I allow myself to breathe. I put the phone down on the pillow and leaned against the wall. My stomach tightened. I rubbed it gently and whispered, "I'm sorry, little one. Hang on." The apartment was utterly silent. No arguments, no broken dishes. But I felt as if something in my marriage had just cracked. A long, deep fissure. People fear the big, loud blows. But I was learning to fear the slow, quiet pricks of a needle. They don't knock you down immediately. They just cause a dull ache that builds until you can no longer bear it. Around 1 a.m., the master bedroom door opened. Kevin came out first, adjusting his collar and glancing quickly around the living room to see if anyone was awake. He walked straight to the front door. The camera recorded him unlocking it from the inside and slipping out as if he'd never been there. It was all so smooth, so practiced, it was terrifying. I couldn't go back to sleep, but I didn't storm out of my room. I knew if I banged on their door and demanded answers, I would get the same old line, asterisk, "You're overthinking it, asterisk." They would turn it around, paint me as the hysterical, jealous wife disrupting the peace. In that scenario, my fragile pregnancy would be the first thing forgotten. The next morning, I left my room with the most normal expression I could manage. Mark was at the table eating breakfast. Patricia was propped up on the sofa, looking pained as usual. I poured myself a glass of warm water and ate some steamed vegetables. No one mentioned the night before. Silence was the unwritten rule. Mark looked at me. "You're going to work today?" I nodded. "Yes, I have a meeting." "Okay," he said, and went back to his food. I glanced at him, just for a second. If he truly didn't know Kevin had the code, then he was being played for a fool in his own home. And if he did know, then what position had he put me in? I didn't ask. It wasn't the right time. When I got to my office, I sat at my desk and sent a short text to my friend, Sarah. It wasn't a cry for help, just a precaution. Asterisk Sarah, some strange things are happening at home. If I text you the word okay at night, it means I'm fine. If you don't hear from me, please give me a call. Asterisk, I didn't need her to solve my problems. I just needed a safety line. That night, I went through the motions as usual. I cooked a bland dinner, spoke little, and did just enough. But in my mind, another piece of the puzzle had clicked into place. Kevin wasn't just a helper. He had the power to enter my home in the middle of the night, a power he certainly hadn't been given by me. Before bed, I re-watched the video clip one more time. I watched every second of it, then saved another backup copy. Then I put my phone away. I was no longer asking myself why they were doing this. I was just reminding myself of a simple truth. Facts don't run away. People just try to hide them. I wasn't going to tear down their curtain. I was going to remove it, piece by piece, with evidence, until no one could force me to endure their lies while branding me an outsider. 3 days had passed since the camera recorded Kevin letting himself into the apartment. I was living in a strange state of high alert. On the surface, I cooked, I complied, I was the dutiful daughter-in-law. But inside, a wire was pulled taut. It wasn't panicked fear. It was the vigilance of someone walking on a freshly mopped floor, knowing they could slip at any moment. I didn't confront Mark about the video. I understood that when people have already decided you're an outsider, any question can be twisted into an accusation of jealousy or drama. I was carrying a fragile life. I couldn't afford to be drawn into a fight that would leave me exhausted. That evening, I was more tired than usual. A technical issue had come up at a construction site, and I was on the phone sorting it out until almost 9 p.m. When I got home, the faint smell of herbal medicine and some kind of essential oil wafted from the master bedroom. The moment I walked in, Patricia's voice called out, "Anna, close the door quietly. I have a headache." I murmured an apology, changed my shoes, and went straight to the kitchen. I reheated some vegetable soup and steamed some squash-bland, odorless food that couldn't be criticized. Mark was on the sofa, staring at his phone, occasionally looking up to ask his mother if she needed more warm water. In this house, all care was directed toward the master bedroom. As usual, I fended for myself. After a quick dinner, I cleaned up, wanting to retreat to my office and lie down as soon as possible. With a high-risk pregnancy, the doctor had forbidden late nights and strong emotions. I was following her orders precisely, except for one thing I couldn't control: the peace in my own home. By 11 p.m., I was in my office. I dimmed the lights, leaving just a small lamp on. I lay on my side, a pillow propped behind my back, trying to relax. Outside, the house grew quiet. Mark went into the master bedroom, and the door clicked shut. I heard Patricia cough once, then silence. I thought the night would pass like the others, but just before midnight, my phone buzzed again. It wasn't the front door this time. It was the hallway camera, reporting motion. I didn't jolt up in panic anymore. I calmly opened the app, and there he was, Kevin. He stood in the hallway, not like a sneak, but with the casual air of someone arriving for a scheduled appointment. He didn't ring the bell. He just knocked twice, very softly, on the master bedroom door and waited. The house was so quiet I could hear the air from the central unit blowing through the vents. I don't know why my hearing was so sharp. Perhaps it was because I was now living on instinct. I put my phone down on the pillow, muted it, and got up, walking silently to my office door. I didn't open it. I just pressed my ear against the wood. From the hallway, I heard Patricia's voice. It wasn't the voice of the daytime mother-in-law. It was low and soft, like someone cooing. "You can't keep coming like this. What if Mark gets suspicious?" I froze, my heart clenching. Just that one sentence was enough to make every scattered piece of this puzzle fall into place. Kevin's voice was equally low but confident. "Don't worry, honey. I know what I'm doing. I'll just be here a little while." Patricia sighed, a sound of both complaint and fear. "You say that, but people's eyes are sharp. And remember, in front of him, you call me Mrs. Anderson. One slip, and it's all over." Kevin chuckled softly, a sound more chilling than a shout. I know. In front of him, I'm Kevin, his helpful assistant. Behind this door, you can call me whatever you want." I clapped a hand over my mouth to stifle a gasp. My lower abdomen cramped. I took a slow, deliberate breath. My mind was no longer foggy with suspicion. It was a cold, hard, humiliating truth. A moment later, I heard the master bedroom door close. I didn't need to look at the camera. That short exchange was a full confession. I backed away from the door and sat down in my chair, my back cold, my hands trembling, but my mind was sharp. So sharp it scared me. They say once trust is broken, it's broken forever. I no longer had any reason to believe a single excuse, but I could not afford to fall apart. I had my child. I stood up, took a sip of warm water, and opened my phone. My hands were still shaking, but I forced myself to be methodical. I went to the camera's cloud storage and saved the clip of Kevin in the hallway. I knew the camera didn't have clear audio, but the image was proof. As for the words I'd just heard, I opened a new note and transcribed them word for word, noting the time and context. I wrote it all down like a police report, the colder, the better. When I was done, I sat in silence for a while. My heart was still racing, but I had my breathing under control. I placed a hand on my stomach and said, so softly only I could hear, "My child, I will not let you be born into a world where your mother is treated like she's disposable." Around 1 a.m., Kevin left. This time, I heard the faint beep of the keypad and the click of the front door without needing a notification. The house fell silent again, a heavy silence that follows unspeakable words. I lay down, but didn't sleep. I pictured Mark's face. He had once told me, "We're a family." He had promised to support me during my pregnancy. Yet now, in the apartment that was legally mine, under the roof of our marriage, a play was being performed, and I had been cast as an unwilling audience member. I didn't hate him in a fiery, vengeful way. I just pitied him for being dragged into a swamp he mistook for filial piety and public image. His obsession with appearances had become a rope, and it had tied up his wife along with him. The next morning, I woke up on time, made a bland breakfast, and handed Patricia her warm water. She gave me a weak smile. "I didn't sleep well last night. Must be the new place." I nodded. "You should get some more rest." Mark sat beside her, dark circles under his eyes. He must have been sleep-deprived too. But he didn't ask how I slept. He just asked his mother if she wanted more oatmeal. I looked at the scene, my heart empty. I no longer expected fair treatment in this house. I now had only two clear goals: protect my pregnancy and protect my property. I went into my office, opened my calendar, and started making a list of practical steps. Schedule prenatal checkups, rearrange my workload to reduce stress, prepare all my legal documents, and, most importantly, plan a safe exit strategy for when the time came. Some people think a gentle woman is a weak woman. I wasn't weak, I was just quiet, because I knew that sometimes silence isn't surrender. It's taking a step back to see your opponent clearly, so you can choose the right moment to walk away, cleanly and directly. In early November 2025, the wind turned in New York. You couldn't leave the house without a jacket. I, too, was wearing an extra layer, but it was heavier than any coat. Clarity. The night I overheard the conversation behind the master bedroom door didn't make me scream. It made me cold. So cold that I could still smile and nod during the day, while a single thought repeated in my mind. Asterisk, I have to get my child out of here, asterisk. I went to my office early that day. I had just sat down and turned on my computer when an email popped up from a partner firm in Europe. I was used to project emails, but this one made my hand pause over the mouse. The message was clear. They were inviting me to Switzerland for 21 months to coordinate an international project. They would provide a studio apartment near the office, full health insurance, a stable work schedule, and a travel stipend. Most importantly, they needed someone who understood on-site execution, could manage documentation, and could keep multiple teams in sync. My heart pounded as I read. Not because of the salary, but because I saw a door. A door that wasn't just a career opportunity, it was an escape route. I sat in silence for a long time before I let out a breath. My mind flashed with images of Patricia in the master bedroom giving orders, of Kevin walking in and out like he owned the place, of Mark standing in the middle, indifferently watching me be treated like a servant. I placed a hand on my stomach. The baby was my anchor, and my baby needed me to be at peace. I checked my calendar. My next prenatal appointment was the following week. If I took the offer, I'd have to arrange a work handover, get my visa, and complete a medical exam. And then a familiar, thorny thought pricked me. Asterisk, what will people say? Asterisk. Back in their Pennsylvania town, what would the narrative be? The daughter-in-law who abandoned her pregnant mother-in-law? The wife who left her husband when the family was in crisis? Public opinion is a knife without a blade, but it cuts deep. But then I remembered another saying, asterisk. You have to put on your own oxygen mask first, asterisk. If I let public opinion tie me down, my child would be the one to pay the price. I didn't call Mark. I knew that would lead to one of two outcomes. He would forbid it, or he would berate me, and it would turn into a tug-of-war I couldn't afford to lose while my pregnancy was so fragile. I needed to talk to someone with a cooler head first. I texted my friend, Sarah, asterisk, are you free? I need to stop by for a minute. Asterisk, Sarah was a veteran in our field who had seen every kind of drama, both on-site and in life. We met at a coffee shop near my office. The moment I sat down, I felt a lump in my throat. She took one look at my face and asked, "What's wrong?" I didn't give her a long, winding story. I gave her the facts. My mother-in-law had moved in, an outsider had the code to my apartment, and I had overheard them. I didn't exaggerate or add emotional flair. Sarah listened without changing her expression. When I was done, she let out a long sigh. "Do you still have the deed to your apartment?" I nodded. "It's in a safe deposit box. Everything is scanned and backed up." She nodded again. "Good. Do you have proof of him coming and going?" "Video clips," I said. Sarah put her cup down and looked me straight in the eye. "Then what are you still doing there?" I managed a weak smile, my eyes welling up. "I'm afraid of the gossip, Sarah. They'll say I abandoned her when she was." I couldn't finish the sentence. Sarah waved her hand dismissively. "Gossip is what people use to chain women down. Public opinion is not going to raise your child for you. You are in a high-risk pregnancy. You have to think of your child first. Your health is everything." Her words were simple but true. I bowed my head, my hands wrapped around my warm mug. Sarah continued, her voice softer. "If you're going to leave, leave cleanly. No arguments, no showdowns. Get everything in order, then walk out the door." She motioned to my laptop. I opened the email with the offer from Switzerland. She read it carefully, then nodded. "This opportunity didn't just fall out of the sky, Anna. It came because you're good at what you do, and because someone up there is looking out for you." She paused, then added a sentence I'll never forget. "In life, there's no shame in avoiding a fight. You're not avoiding it because you're scared. You're avoiding it to protect yourself and your child." I left the coffee shop feeling a little lighter, but not without a plan. I started making a list of tasks, like setting up a project timeline. During my lunch break, I went to the bank to double-check my safe deposit box. Seeing the documents safe inside gave me a real sense of relief. I wasn't greedy. I just needed to be sure that what was mine was still mine. Back at home that night, I maintained my routine. Patricia called for warm water from the master bedroom. I brought it. Mark asked if his mother was eating well. I didn't interject. I watched them with a new perspective, no longer hoping for kindness, just hoping they wouldn't notice I was planning my departure. That night, I placed an envelope with $1,000 on my desk. It wasn't that I was wealthy, but I understood that people like Mark cling to moral arguments. That money was to shut his mouth. Later, when he screamed, he couldn't scream. She left without a penny and abandoned my mother. I wasn't paying a debt. I was paying for a clean getaway. I also bought a new high-security lock for the front door, but I didn't install it yet. I tucked it away in a drawer. I'd change it when I came back. A few nights later, Mark suddenly asked, "You've been on your phone a lot lately. What are you doing?" I looked up, my voice steady. "I'm tracking project progress. The clients are messaging me constantly. You know how my job is." He grunted in reply and went back to his own phone. I knew he believed me because he had never really cared about the details of my work, only whether it made him look bad. I closed my office door and sat down. Outside, I could hear Patricia's soft cough and Mark's footsteps. The house felt full, but cold. I placed a hand on my stomach, reminding myself to eat and sleep on schedule, to stay calm. And I understood a very simple truth. Some goodbyes don't need words. They just need a quiet, orderly exit. That night, I slept more soundly than I had in weeks, not because the fear was gone, but because I finally had a path forward. I chose a weekday morning. The sky was still dark, the apartment hallway so quiet I could hear the hum of the building's ventilation. I didn't choose a weekend. Weekends meant more people around, more questions, more potential witnesses to their drama. I needed a clean exit. The night before, I had packed only the essentials: my personal documents, a few loose-fitting outfits, my prenatal vitamins, my medical records. I didn't take much. That would look like I was running away. I was going on a long-term work assignment. I was leaving through the front door, not sneaking out the back. At 4:30 a.m., I woke up. No alarm, no panic, just a cold, clear-headed awareness. I got out of bed slowly, washed my face with warm water, and looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were different. The hopeful eyes were gone, replaced by the eyes of someone who operated on principles, not wishes. I pulled my suitcase from the corner of my office. I had wiped down the wheels the night before so they would roll silently across the floor. It sounds ridiculous, but life sometimes demands that level of meticulousness. One loud clatter could have turned my departure into a chaotic scene. I stepped into the dim, quiet living room. I placed the envelope with the $1,000 on the coffee table under a handwritten note. It was short. *Mark, here is something to help with your mother's initial expenses. After that, you'll need to make your own arrangements. I didn't write more. Long letters can be twisted. Just as I set it down, the master bedroom door creaked open. Mark stepped out. He must have heard the soft roll of the wheels. He saw the suitcase, and his eyes widened. "What are you doing at this hour?" His voice wasn't worried. It was the voice of someone afraid of losing control. I remained calm. "I'm going on a long-term work assignment." He strode toward me, his voice low and menacing. "What assignment? Where do you think you're going at a time like this?" I looked him straight in the eye. "I've accepted a project in Switzerland. I'll be gone for 21 months. He froze, as if he'd been slapped. Then he let out a short, bitter laugh. "Switzerland? What are you making up? With everything going on in this house, you're just going to leave? You think you can do that?" The master bedroom door opened wider. Patricia appeared, her hair messy, but her voice was sharp with the righteous indignation of someone who wields morality like a whip. "Where are you going? Are you really leaving?" I kept my breathing steady. My baby was fragile. I couldn't afford to get angry. I nodded politely one last time. "Good morning, Patricia." She put her hands on her hips, looking me up and down. "Don't you good morning me? I'm in this condition, and you're leaving? Who's going to take care of me? You're the daughter-in-law. You have a duty." Mark grabbed the handle of my suitcase, pulling it back. "Don't you play these games, Anna. If you leave, you'll humiliate me." I placed my hand on the other side of the handle, holding it firm but not yanking. "Mark, "Let go," I said slowly. "I am not going to fight with you." "No fight?" he seethed. "You're sneaking out before dawn," Patricia chimed in, her voice rising. "A woman follows her husband. If you walk out that door, you are a disgrace to this family." I heard the word disgrace and felt only a cold clarity. They needed a label to slap on me. With that label, they could be the victims and tell the story their way. I looked at Mark, my voice still even. "You say I'm humiliating you. What about you? Letting an outsider come and go from our home with a key code in the middle of the night? Letting him give orders in our kitchen? Calling me an outsider? Did you think you had any dignity left?" Mark flinched. His grip on the suitcase wavered for a second, then he tightened it, as if holding on could block out the truth. "There you go again, overthinking, making things up." I nodded slightly. "Yes, I've been thinking a lot. That's why I'm leaving." Patricia rushed to block the doorway. "If you leave, I'll curse you. This family doesn't need a daughter-in-law like you." Mark growled, "If you go, you're abandoning my mother. When people find out, you'll be the one in shame." I reached down, picked up the envelope from the coffee table, and pressed it into his hand. He recoiled as if burned. "Here is $1,000. I am not abandoning anyone. Take it, so you can't say I did." He stared at the envelope, his face turning pale. He wanted to throw it down, but with his mother watching, he couldn't appear not to care. His precious public image had trapped him more effectively than it had ever trapped me. I turned to Patricia, my voice no longer deferential, but not disrespectful either, just distant enough to protect myself. "If you need care, you have your son. It will be more convenient for Mark to take care of you." She opened her mouth to yell, but I didn't let her drag me into a shouting match. I raised a hand slightly, speaking slowly and clearly. "I am going on a work assignment. I am not running away. I am walking out the front door. If anyone asks, you can tell them I'm earning a living. Don't tell them I abandoned you." Mark moved to grab the suitcase again. I looked him in the eye, my voice quiet but sharp. "Let go, Mark, or I will call security." He froze. In a high-rise apartment building, involving security was the ultimate public humiliation for a man like him. He released his grip, but stood between me and the door, a final, futile attempt to exert control. "If you leave, who will take care of my mother?" he asked, his voice suddenly dropping from a command to a plea. I answered simply. "You will," Patricia scoffed. "You think going abroad is so great? Once you're gone, don't even think about coming back." I looked at her and said one last thing, not with anger, but with finality. Whether I come back or not is my decision. I opened the door. The cold hallway air hit my face. I pulled my suitcase out, its wheels making a straight, clean line on the floor. Behind me, I heard Patricia shriek, "She's going, Mark! Are you just going to let her go?" He didn't follow. He was rooted to the spot, probably caught between his mother's moralizing and the thick envelope of cash in his hand. I pressed the button for the elevator. As the doors closed, I saw Mark's face through the gap, a mixture of anger, confusion, and helplessness. I no longer felt the need to explain myself. Explaining to someone who is determined not to understand is just a waste of breath. Down in the parking garage, I called a car. On the way to the airport, the streets of New York were still quiet. I leaned my head against the window, one hand resting on my stomach. My heart was still beating fast, but it wasn't from fear. It was the rhythm of someone who had just escaped a whirlpool. I hadn't won a fight. I had just left at the right time. The plane landed on a gray, chilly afternoon in Switzerland. The air was crisp and dry. It shocks you into alertness. I pulled my suitcase through the airport, looking at the bare trees and the immaculately clean streets, and wished my own life could feel that clean. Clean of the shouting, clean of the suffocating sense of duty. The studio apartment the company provided was small but perfect. A bed, a desk, a kitchenette, and a window overlooking a quiet street. I turned on the heat, hung up my coat, and sat on the edge of the bed, letting out a long, slow breath. There was no one shouting, "Anna, get me some water." No one reminding me not to look bad. There was only the gentle hum of the heater. I slept for 10 straight hours, a deep, uninterrupted sleep I hadn't had in months. The next morning, I made a warm glass of milk, ate some toast, and opened my laptop. It was my first official day of work. I walked into the partner's office and was treated with professional courtesy. I was addressed by my title. I was asked, "What do you need to work effectively?" It sounds normal, but to me, it felt like a luxury to be seen as a person. The work culture here was straightforward. Meetings had agendas. Tasks had clear owners. No one used guilt or public opinion as a management tool. I did my job. I presented my data. I met my deadlines, and in return, I received respect. I didn't have to flatter, and I didn't have to yield. I just had to be competent. But there was one thing I couldn't let go of: the apartment in New York. I had promised my friend Sarah I would only check the cameras once a day to avoid torturing myself. I kept that promise. Every night, after a light dinner and a warm shower, I would sit at my desk, open the app, and look. Just once. Then I would close it. The first night, I saw Mark in the kitchen, fumbling with a ladle like someone who had never cooked a meal in his life. Patricia sat at the dining table, scowling. "Too much water. Who can eat this? You're a grown man, and you're this incompetent?" Mark bit his lip and started washing a pot, scrubbing so hard that water splashed everywhere. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt a sad, bitter amusement. He used to give me orders like a drill sergeant, and now his own mother was drilling him in the kitchen. The second night, Patricia was on the sofa, calling for Mark to bring her a pillow, then some warm water. He scurried back and forth. I could see the apartment was messier than before. Without someone cleaning up after them, things were starting to pile up. I was about to turn off the feed when the front door camera sent a notification. It was Kevin. He stepped into the frame, hands in his pockets, looking relaxed. He keyed in the code, and the door opened on the first try. He came inside without calling out for Mark, took off his shoes, and walked straight to the kitchen. He opened the refrigerator, took out some ingredients, and started seasoning the pot on the stove as if he were the head chef. Then he walked toward the master bedroom. What made my blood run cold was that Mark wasn't even home yet. Kevin had let himself into my apartment when only Patricia was there, and this was apparently their new normal. I didn't turn it off. I watched as the hallway camera showed him knock twice on the master bedroom door. The door opened, and he slipped inside. The apartment fell silent. I sat there, motionless. Here in Switzerland, I was a respected project manager. But back in New York, my home was being treated like a public space. I saved the clip. My hands didn't even shake this time. It had become a reflex. I named the file with the date and time and saved it to a folder I labeled Evidence. I wasn't living on suspicion anymore. I was living on proof. Over the next few weeks, the pattern repeated, becoming more brazen each time. One day, Kevin would bring groceries straight to the master bedroom. Another day, I watched him pull the curtains in the master bedroom closed before he went inside. One evening, Mark came home late and knocked on his own master bedroom door, waiting outside while Kevin was inside with his mother. I watched it, feeling sick. If Mark had any sense left, the humiliation should have been unbearable. But he had chosen to be blind because seeing the truth would shatter the public image he so desperately clung to. I didn't text him. I didn't call to start a fight. I just methodically documented everything. I took screenshots of key moments, saved the video files, and added brief, factual notes. No emotion, no interpretation. The truth was powerful enough on its own. One night, after turning off the feed, I stared out my window. The street below was quiet, the yellow lamps reflecting on the wet pavement. I placed a hand on my growing belly. They say family shouldn't turn on each other, but my family had. I no longer felt anger in a way that made me want revenge. I just wanted a clean, final resolution. I knew they wouldn't stop at making me their servant. Once they got used to acting like owners, they would start thinking about the asset itself. I opened my calendar. They would most likely make their move while the owner was away. I was away. The risk to my apartment was higher than ever. I sent a short email to a lawyer my friend had recommended, a Miss Davis, requesting an online consultation. I kept my tone professional. From now on, everything had to be by the book. After I sent it, I went to bed. I wasn't praying for Mark to see the light. I was just praying for myself to have enough strength and composure to see this through. In life, the person who wins isn't always the strongest, but the one with the most patience. And my patience was no longer about endurance. It was about taking the right steps, so that when the time came, I would not falter. Late one November night in Switzerland, my phone buzzed, a notification from the front door camera. Asterisk, prolonged motion detected asterisk. Usually, it was just a delivery person or building security, but this time the alerts kept coming. I opened the app. Standing in front of my apartment in New York were 3 people. Mark, dressed in a button-down shirt as if for a meeting. Patricia, fanning herself and talking animatedly. And a man in a dark suit holding a folder and a laser measure, a real estate agent. My blood ran cold. The saying is true. When the cat's away, the mice will play. They were inside now. The agent sat on my sofa and opened his laptop. Mark spoke with a forced casualness. This is a corner unit. Great light. We could probably get around $750,000 for a quick sale. Patricia jumped in. That's right. This apartment belongs to my son and his wife, and I need the money for my care. We need to sell it soon. Asterisk. Belongs to my son and his wife. Asterisk. They said it so smoothly, as if they hadn't called me an outsider just weeks before. The agent nodded professionally. The location is good. If the paperwork is in order, it should move fast. I'll just need to see the deed and other relevant documents to prepare the listing. Mark waved a hand. Of course. Let me get it. He stood up and walked toward my office, the room I had once locked as my final boundary. He opened the door and began rummaging through drawers and cabinets, growing more frantic by the minute. I watched, a bitter smile on my lips. He had never cared what was in that room, and now he was tearing it apart. After 10 minutes, he came out, his face grim. I must have misplaced it. Patricia shot up. What do you mean misplaced it? You're the one who put it away. Just be quiet, Mom, and let me think, he snapped. He then stormed into the master bedroom and started pulling apart the bed, looking under the mattress as if the deed would magically appear. The agent's expression had shifted to one of caution. He cleared his throat. Sir, ma'am, I have to follow procedure. Without the ownership documents, I can't take the listing. It could lead to legal disputes down the line. Patricia cut him off. What disputes? It's their apartment. The agent smiled politely but took a step back. Yes, but the legal title has to be clear. Mark returned, his face flushed. He pulled out his phone, and I knew what was coming. The first call came through to my phone at 3 a.m. Swiss time. I saw his name and let it ring until it went to voicemail. A flood of texts followed. Asterisk. Where did you hide the deed? Asterisk. Asterisk. What game are you playing? Don't push me. Asterisk. Asterisk. You're all the way over there and you're still this vicious. Asterisk. I read them, but the old pain was gone. It had been replaced by a chilling clarity. When they needed me to serve, I was a wife. When they wanted me to submit, I was an outsider. And when they couldn't find the paperwork, I was vicious. I didn't reply to him. I opened my laptop and composed a short, professional email to my lawyer, Miss Davis. Asterisk, Miss Davis. I need urgent advice. My husband's family has brought a real estate agent into my privately owned property to arrange its sale without my consent. I have video evidence and threatening text messages. Please advise on the legal steps to block any unauthorized transaction. Asterisk. I attached the video clips and screenshots of Mark's texts. After I hit send, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. I was no longer alone in this. Less than a day later, Miss Davis replied. She was direct. The apartment was my sole property. Any sale without my signature was void. She had already drafted a sharp cease and desist letter for me to send to the real estate agent. That evening, the camera showed the agent returning alone. Mark met him at the door, looking tense. The agent was blunt. Mr. Anderson, I have to be honest. If the property is in your wife's name and she isn't here to sign, I cannot represent you. I don't want any legal trouble. Mark insisted. It's our marital home. I can only go by what's on the deed, the agent said firmly. Show me the deed or a notarized power of attorney, and we can proceed. Patricia came out of her room, her voice sharp. What kind of business are you running? This is my son's house. Ma'am, with all due respect, the law is the law. Mark went to a corner and tried calling me again. I still didn't answer. I no longer needed to hear his shouting. I needed him to hear the law. I forwarded the letter from my lawyer directly to the agent's email with a simple message. Asterisk. Please cease all activity related to the sale of this property. I am the legal owner, and any unauthorized transaction will be met with legal action. Asterisk. 15 minutes later, the agent stood up and packed his things. I'm sorry, but my hands are tied. When your wife contacts me directly, we can talk. He left quickly, as if fleeing a burning building. Mark slammed his hand on the coffee table. Patricia shrieked, "This is your fault! You let her go, and now she holds all the cards. How humiliating!" For the first time on camera, I saw him yell back at her, "Be quiet, Mom! I told you not to make a scene." I watched. Not with glee, but with a sense of inevitability. They had sown disrespect and deceit, and now they were reaping helplessness and failure. I took one final step. I sent a formal notice to the building management, attaching a photo of Kevin and a log of his unauthorized entries. I requested they document his trespassing and restrict his access to the building. I kept it factual, focusing on security, not drama. The next day, Mark sent one last text. His tone had changed from anger to desperation. Asterisk. Tell me what you want, Anna. Asterisk. I read it and turned off my screen. I wanted nothing from him anymore, except for him to stop. That night, I lay in my studio in Switzerland, listening to the hum of the heater as snow fell outside. I placed a hand on my belly and told myself to get some sleep. Some battles aren't won with swords and shields. They are won with paperwork in the right place, evidence in the right folder, and a calm, unwavering resolve. I returned to New York on a cold day in early January. The chill in the air made you feel awake and made it hard to pretend things were warm. I didn't come back to argue or to demand an apology. I came back to close the chapter on a marriage that had died the moment I was called an outsider. I met with my lawyer, Miss Davis, at her office near the courthouse. She took one look at me and asked, "Are you ready for this?" I nodded. "I just want it to be over, cleanly." "Cleanly means correctly," she said. "Correct paperwork, correct procedure." We prepared the divorce filings. I asked for nothing more than what was already legally mine. The apartment was separate property, acquired before the marriage and in my name only. That was the crux of it. I brought my bank receipts, a notarized copy of the deed, and a binder of evidence, all organized by date, the text messages, the video clips of the door opening, of the real estate agent, of Kevin coming and going. I told my story not with tears, but with facts. At the mediation, Mark was late. He looked thinner, with dark circles under his eyes. The first words out of his mouth were, "Anna, you're doing this to humiliate me." I looked at him calmly. "You once told me I was an outsider. An outsider has no obligation to protect your public image." He faltered, then turned to the mediator, his voice shifting into a practiced, pitiful tone. "Ma'am, my mother is pregnant. My wife abandoned us, and now she wants to kick me out of my home. Isn't that cruel?" I didn't respond. Miss Davis presented the paperwork, clearly stating the apartment was my sole property, and Mark had no legal right to reside there without my consent. Hearing the cold, legal language state my case was a relief. Finally, something was speaking for me that couldn't be twisted into disrespect. Mark tried a different tactic, his voice pleading. "Think about this, Anna. I was wrong. But my mother, she isn't well." I replied simply, "You can take care of your mother. You're her son." Patricia wasn't there, but her shadow loomed over every word Mark said. He kept repeating the phrases, times pregnant mother, asterisk, asterisk, filial duty, asterisk, asterisk, what will people say, asterisk, as if they were a magic shield. I listened and realized that I was no longer afraid of that shield. It was just paper, wrapped around an empty box. When it came time to present evidence, I submitted the proof of an unauthorized person accessing my home and the attempt to sell my property. I didn't need to mention the affair. The trespass and the illegal attempt to sell were enough to demonstrate the risk and the utter lack of respect for my ownership rights. Mark's face went pale. "You set me up," he hissed. "I protected myself," I replied. The divorce was granted. The apartment was affirmed as mine. Mark's right to live there was terminated. I didn't feel a surge of victory. I just felt light, as if I had finally taken off a heavy, wet coat. The aftermath was swift. I worked with the building management, presented the court order, and had all the locks and key codes changed. Kevin was officially barred from the property. The building manager looked at me with a new respect. This was no longer a messy domestic dispute, but a matter of property rights and security. Mark moved out one afternoon. I stood by the door as he carried out a few cardboard boxes, keeping a respectful distance. As he crossed the threshold for the last time, I remembered him waiting for me in the lobby all those years ago. It's strange how life comes full circle. He had waited then out of love. He was leaving now because he had chosen to stand on the wrong side of the truth. The rest, I didn't have to orchestrate. Karma took care of it. Back in Pennsylvania, relatives started asking Mark pointed questions. If his mother was pregnant, why did his wife leave and file for divorce? Pushed into a corner, his pride wounded, Mark finally snapped during one family argument and blurted out the one thing that silenced the entire town. "My mother's pregnancy isn't what you think it is." That was all it took. In a small town, people don't need the details. The shunning was quiet but complete. Patricia would go to the market, and conversations would stop. The public shame she had tried to weaponize against me had turned back and consumed her. As for Kevin, once he was barred from my building and rumors of the scandal began to spread, his professional life evaporated. No one wanted to be associated with that kind of trouble. He had been so smooth when whispering sweet nothings to Patricia, but he was just as quick to vanish. He changed his number and disappeared. Patricia was left with nothing and turned to Mark. But by then, he had lost everything. His home, his wife, his dignity. He didn't hit her, but he gave her the same cold treatment he had once given me. "You made this mess, Mom. You deal with it." I heard all of this later, in brief updates from Sarah. I didn't ask for details. My satisfaction didn't come from their suffering. It came from my peace. The peace I once thought I had to beg for, I realized I only had to stand up and claim. I returned to my apartment, threw open all the windows, and hired a crew for a deep cleaning. I repainted the walls and had the new high-security lock installed. I placed a small potted plant on the balcony, made a cup of ginger tea, and sat watching the sunlight stream in. For the first time in a very long time, it felt like home. Not a place to be judged or lectured, but a sanctuary. A few weeks later, I returned to Switzerland to continue my project and prepare for my new life as a mother, in peace. I didn't want pity, and I didn't need applause. I just wanted my child to grow up in a place where their mother was respected. The lesson was simple. Never use morality to oppress others, and never let fear of what people might say cause you to trade away your health, your home, or your self-respect.